All right, so here we are. So, welcome to Tea with Myrtis, Artistically Speaking. It's our new series with conversations engaging artists who are in our Women Heal through Rite and Ritual exhibition. My first guest today is Delita Martin, who is primarily a printmaker, but incorporates a multidisciplinary approach into creating these richly textured surfaces in her work of which features lionized figures of men and now women and men. And so we're going to delve into her artistic practice, what inspires her to create, and just see a new side, a different side of Delita Martin. So welcome, Delita. Welcome to Tea Time.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So let's start with your early childhood. When did you know that you were an artist?
I was 5 years old when I declared I was an artist. I loved creating. Fortunately, I was in a family of creative individuals. There were quilt makers, and my father was a painter. He actually studied art at Texas Southern University with John T. Biggers. And there were storytellers and writers and poets. So I was around creativity all the time, and I was encouraged to create. So growing up, my mother would introduce me as her youngest child. This is my baby, and she's an artist. And so I grew up believing I was an artist. And so at 5, I decided I'm going to be an artist. I'm going to go to Texas Southern University. I'm going to study with John Biggers. And most of that came true. I missed Dr. Biggers. He left by the time I got there, but I did have an opportunity to meet him, have him view my work, and, all those wonderful things. But I knew early on that's what I wanted to do.
Mhm. Tell me a little bit about your father's work and the subject matter of his work.
He did a lot of portraits, mostly
Mm.
drawing, but he's a very good oil painter. I have 3 pieces of his work. 2 are portraits of me as a baby, and one is a painting that he did of Christ on the cross. And my first drawing is on the back of that painting. So I
Mm.
never got in trouble for painting on the walls or on furniture or just creating, making things, which I find very interesting when I look back at it now. But his subject matter was primarily people, but he also made furniture,
Mm.
and so
Mhm.
he did work like that.
So the fact that his work was focused primarily on the body, the figure, do you think that in any way inspired the work that you're creating?
Oh, absolutely. Um, I think we would draw together when I was younger. I would go in his studio with him, and I would try and copy his work as he was working. And so I think, growing up watching the people in my family, because I was very observant of people just in general, and then seeing, it was very exciting to see people that looked like me in artwork, which, going to school, because I lived in a predominantly white town, went to a predominantly white school, I didn't see that. So I was very fascinated. So when I was introduced to Dr. Biggers' work, and I saw my mother and I saw my grandmother and I saw all these amazing people in his work that looked like me, I think it really kind of sparked something in me.
Mm, that's wonderful. So we're having this conversation virtually because, as with everyone in the universe, this virus has disrupted many things, and one of which was the exhibition, your
Mhm.
solo exhibition at the National Women in the Arts. I want to make sure that I get the right, the National Women in the Arts Museum in Washington, D.C. The title of the exhibition is Delita Martin, Calling Down the Spirits. And during the course of the show, you were to have had a lecture and book signing. So unfortunately, that neither of those events, or it was actually a combined event, but it did not take place.
Yes.
So talk to us a little bit about what was featured in the exhibition and also what you intended to address during your presentation.
Well, there was several works that were featured in the exhibition. I believe there was one definitely in the book that I created. And the exhibition itself, I really wanted to address the spiritual connection that I feel I have with my ancestors and with women, and just really talk about spirituality in general. And I think my work does that across a span of time. And to have these works talk to each other that have all been created during different periods of time and from different bodies of work, I felt was very impactful, because the conversation, there was a common thread throughout the work itself. They were created at different times, but they talked about identity, about how we identify as the spiritual self throughout these works. And so it was important to talk about that. And I really wanted to address creating those works, because creating the works were just as important as the works themselves. Once I changed my spiritual practice, the work itself changed. The idea of meditation, of prayer, of introspection of myself, and asking myself the really hard questions of why I create something, what something means. Because we don't just put things on canvas or things on paper without them having a significant meaning to them. And so I had to ask myself all of those questions. And those are the things that I wanted to address in the talk. I wanted to talk about the symbolism. I wanted to talk about the women in the work who were actually pictured in the work. I wanted to talk about the spirit forms that were in the work and how the two interacted and how these two worlds came together.
So some of that information might be revealed in the book that you created. So I say might because, you know, your work is on a continuum. So I know that some of those pieces may or may not have been included in the exhibition. But share the book with our viewers, and also tell them how they can obtain a copy of it.
Absolutely. So I created a body of work called Shadows in the Garden. And I wanted to not just only address that work, but also show work leading up to that. Because again, it's a continuation of a conversation that talks about spirituality. And so this is the book here. It's a hardcover book, and you can actually purchase it on my website, blackboxpress.com. And here is one of the images that was included in the exhibition, which is titled New Beginnings. And this is a really important piece. It's a piece that I considered a really pivotal piece in the creative process, because this is actually a portrait of myself, and I am talking with, or in communications with, a spirit figure. And so when you look at my work, and you would, normally they would be referred to as the background, but I refer to them as the veilscape, that space between the waking world and the spirit world. And it's like, how do we marry into that space? How do we become one with that space? And so you begin to see the figure going in and out of the pattern tattooing on the body, which is another form of identification, and really transitioning myself into this space, into this spiritual space. And so it was important. It was an important piece for me to work on, because I was asking myself, how do I, as the artist, create something larger than myself? How do I fit into this space? And I've put other people in those spaces, but what does it feel like for me? So to see myself in that space and to feel myself creating myself in that space, it was a really spiritual moment for me. And so that piece was it was a very important piece in the creative process for me.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful piece and very powerful to witness. I love it. It's among many of my favorites. So the new body of work that you've created, and 3 of the pieces are featured in the Women Heal Through Rite and Ritual exhibition. Tell us about the new series and a little bit about like each one of the pieces, if you will. So I'll let you respond to the first question.
So Typically, when I work on a piece, again, it's a continuation of a previous conversation. And it's like, how can we look at this work from a new perspective, or have a new perspective on the conversation? And again, the conversation about identity. How do we identify with the spiritual self? What does that look like? And so I really wanted to challenge myself in terms of movement. How do I move in this space? How do I exist in the space? And I don't think that that was as addressed as in depth as it is in the new work. And a lot of the work has begun to come off the page. The idea that you cannot contain God, you cannot contain what is in us. So the work has begun to come off the page. And I have brought in more elements of the printmaking, which changes the space, changes the dynamics of the works in the space. So there's this combination between the printed body and the drawn body. And so there are all of these symbolisms, the symbols that are showing up in the work again. So you're having the bird that appears more often in the work, the fruit that appears in the work. I believe you have a piece there with you called Six Persimmons. And
Yes.
the idea that, you know, you reach this enlightenment in the work, the idea that you can go into this space and reach an understanding that you don't that you may not ordinarily be able to have. And so the work is really, really focused on reaching that point of understanding.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about Star Children. The outward gaze of those figures is really mesmerizing. I find myself looking deeply, trying to figure out what's in their soul. I mean, it really, really draws you in.
And I think that's what attracted me to the models. So,
Mm,
so in order to tell you about that piece, I have to tell you about these two beautiful young ladies. I was at an exhibition. A friend of mine was having an exhibition, and I was there. And this young girl walks in, and her spirit was just, I think it came in before she did walk
mm,
through the door. And she was just such a beautiful, beautiful soul, just a beautiful, intelligent young lady. And I asked her mother if would it be okay if I asked her to model for me. And it was really interesting because I didn't know she had a sister at the time, but the two figures are sisters, and they
oh,
are
wow.
so close. And if you watch them on social media and you see them together, it's almost like they're completing each other's sentences.
Mm,
And they just had this cosmic relationship about them that you really, I mean, you're in amazement to watch them when they came to the studio and how they completed each other. And just to see them together was incredible. And so I had to bring them into the work.
wow. I think that really speaks to why the energy that surrounds that piece is, you feel it. You really do feel it. The
And that's
duality,
the brilliance
yes.
of the work, was this duality that was happening with them, but there was this oneness. And
Mm-hmm.
they literally complete each other. And I thought they were twins, but one is, I believe, 2 years older than the other. And I was like, oh my goodness, you guys, you look like twins. And they're just beautiful girls.
Yeah, they really, really are beautiful. Their energy just leaps beyond the surface of the work, and it really has filled the room that they're hanging, the piece is hanging in. It's just, uh, it's like otherworldly. I love it. As I shared with you, I've been sitting in the space, just really taking the work in. You know, we can't allow the public to interact with the pieces, so I haven't received, you know, the feedback that we're accustomed to getting. But of course, we're getting a lot of great comments online about how powerful the show is, and people are really anticipating the moment when we can invite them in. So we're really excited about that and can't wait to be able to do that. But I want you to talk a little bit about Black Moon and the figure that's holding the moon and the bird in its hand.
Yes. So I met another young lady who I asked to model for me. And I don't ever know who my models are going to be, and it's just individuals that I see, and for one reason or another they capture me. And so the idea that um, the black moon, this transition, it's a moon that appears, two full moons within a cycle, and where there's normally one. So the idea of the moon being a symbol for the female and the bird being a symbol for the human spirit in my work, and the fact that she's holding this, and it's almost like an offering that she's offering this to the world. And so I like to talk about how we spiritually give and how we spiritually share. And that's really what that piece is about, these phases that we go through, and we share them in this transition that we share with each other.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about the two sisters that you've used as models and the young woman who posed for Black Moon. And I also noticed that, and perhaps this isn't recent, but there has been a call. You put out a call for models. So
Yes.
is that new for you? Because I know that in the past, many of the figures have been women in your family or self-portraits. So tell us about that.
Wow, I was really excited about it. It was something new for me, and I'm always trying to challenge myself to, I don't want to be in this little box all the time. And so I feel like when I push myself, it's always interesting to see how I react to the figure or react to the situation. So challenge myself in terms of the size in which I work, the mediums that I work in, how I obtain the models that I have. All of those are sometimes challenges for me. So reviewing the models, there were just some amazingly beautiful women. Some of the correspondences that they sent in was well beyond anything that I asked for. So I'm really looking forward to trying to channel that energy. And with us being in this virtual world now, which we are, that's going to be really interesting to work virtually with a model, because I'm used to having people in my studio or being in their space and that energy that happens. So I'm hoping to see what type of energy we're able to create virtually. So I'm looking forward to the challenge.
Well, thank you, Delita Martin. This has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you for joining me today for Tea Time. And I look forward to seeing you in Baltimore when we get past the, what are we calling it?
Self-quarantine.
Quarantine. Yes, right. It changes from day to day. But when we are back to whatever new normal we're living, and we're
Yes.
able to, invite people in, we are committed to hosting an opening reception. We're going to have a big party here when the gallery reopens. And so I look forward to seeing you then. And
Absolutely.
thank you today for your time. This has been fascinating. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.